All right, this is Luis Vasquez from Beal Applied Innovation at UCI, and welcome to our first weekly virtual event. Our goal is to continue to connect Southern California innovation ecosystem with experts and resources that will help them navigate the current crisis and thrive in this conditions, and then especially during the recovery. We hope to host at least one virtual event per week. For today's event, we're honored to have Yoon from Mercato Partners as our speaker. Mercato Partners is a venture capital firm based in Utah that focuses on growth stage companies, but they're very active here in Orange County. They've got investments in Stance, the stock company, Skullcandy, the personal electronics company, and Effisoft, which is an enterprise software company based in Irvine. Yoon is the vice president of marketing practice at Mercato Partners, where he helps their portfolio companies with strategy, P&L management, product marketing, digital marketing, branding, public relations, and analyst relations. So he's got a full plate. John can do this because he has 30 years of experience building teams, developing marketing and product strategy, and executing operating plans to deliver consistent results both at Fortune 500 companies as well as the startups and startups within their portfolio. In order to make this virtual event efficient for everyone involved, we're going to have all the attendees in mute mode. If you have a question though, please type the question in the chat box directed at the host. We'll moderate and ask those questions to John at the end of the presentation. And a little bit of a warning that the presentation is being recorded, and so we will have that available on our website afterwards so that anybody that has to leave can access it then. So with that, I think we'll have Yoon take it away.
Okay, Luis, can you guys hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Great. Thanks everyone for taking your lunch hour to hang out on this virtual, I thought you initially said virtuous, and I thought, well, that's going to disqualify me, but virtual meeting. It's really great. We've had great experiences. Mercato and UCI have had great collaborative experiences. And Luis, thanks to you and your team for hosting. That photo of me is a very, very heavily doctored good one. So people say that I have a face for radio, and I'm going to prove it by jumping into these slides. So without further ado, where's my cursor? Okay, so marketing in crisis. On the off chance that a crisis of global proportion might occur sometime in your profession, I'm not saying that it will, but in the off chance that it does, here are some things that I and my colleagues, we've been in discussions, we've come to understand there are certain best practices that you might want to consider. Many of you on the call are entrepreneurs. Many of you are serial entrepreneurs. One of you might be a serial killer, I don't know. But the point of it is that there are things to do and things not to do. But before I jump in too much, Luis gave you guys a very good overview of Mercato. But this is who we are. We are actually 4 funds inside. We are a multi-practice private equity firm. Mercato has the Traverse Fund, and Traverse focuses on growth stage. We have Prelude, which focuses on early stage, Alpha, and the Savory Fund, which does food and beverage. So here are some of the companies that we've backed, and some of them are in the California area. Joe Kaiser is my counterpart. If you are a company looking for funding, you're a growth stage company, then Joe, whose contact information I will provide at the very, very end, is the guy to talk to. He's the money guy, and I'm the marketing guy. So I think he's the more important one. On the right-hand side, it's a little bit about me. Big companies, small companies, startups. So I have been in your seat on more than one occasion, and I know how daunting it can be. In good times, it can be hard. But when the seas get rough, it's even worse if you're a growth stage company, an early stage company, your cash reserves, you're just hitting your stride, you're getting your programs in place, and then all of a sudden this sort of thing happens. But these are some sobering numbers. Even before there was a virus, even before there was a pandemic, here are some numbers that should really, really make marketers sit up and cringe. I'm amazed that that some of these statistics are as high as they are. So, okay, we'll start with the easy ones. 37% of us say that the biggest challenge is prospecting. Of course, that's not surprising. I'm actually a little surprised that it's not bigger. Here's another interesting statistic. 96% of the folks that come to your websites are not ready to buy. Again, should not be a surprise, but there's an entire discipline of social selling, which my colleague Dasha Trakamets recently did a presentation and basically a field guide on how to do social selling so that those folks who come to your website not ready to buy, just looking for information, would get a better experience, have a better experience with your company, with members of your customer-facing teams. This is a particularly sad thing for me. A third of the companies have no attribution model for marketing. Now, in the old days, and I know what I'm talking about when I say old. Mercato's only 11 years old. I'm significantly older than 11 years. I've been doing this for a long time. And 34% have no attribution model for marketing performance. And in the old days, marketers were not necessarily the most quantitative folks. We were the ones that were interested in creative and copy and concept and promotional programs and things like that. There is no excuse though. Now, if you're a marketer today, there's no excuse not to have a tight discipline in terms of quantitative analysis and tools and techniques. But a third of the companies don't know an attribution model. They don't know where their leads, where their conversions, where their closed ones are coming from, which is like staggering around in a snowstorm or flying blind with no instruments or visibility. But the two most significant pieces are here. 68% of companies don't have a sales funnel. Now, again, I want to remind you, this is not post-COVID. This is pre-COVID. 68% don't have a sales funnel. And this is from Salesforce. They did a survey of a wide range of companies. Of those 68% of those guys don't have a sales funnel, 79% had marketing leads that were never converted to sales. Now, let me be specific about that. 79% of marketing leads never converted to sales. That doesn't mean that they didn't convert to closed won. This means they didn't get out of the gate. So somebody's spending all of this money on marketing, and those leads that they're generating don't get handed over to the sales department. And that's really terrifying, right? Now, you inject the entire mess that we're living through now. And when you have these sorts of situations, conditions, pre-existing conditions, then I think that it makes our jobs as marketers, as entrepreneurs, even more difficult. There's been a lot of talk about COVID-19, a lot of talk about it from a war analogy perspective. Ben Horowitz talks about a wartime CEO. We talk about a war against the pandemic. And that got me thinking, along with some colleagues, about this notion, this framework of wartime analogies, wartime terminology, etc. I saw that there were a couple of folks on the call who have worked with me in the past. They're all laughing right now because this is evidently something that I do a lot. I was also actually looking to make sure that my mom wasn't on the call, attempting to Zoom bomb this. So she's not in unless she's using an alias, but she's not that technically savvy. So I think we're safe. But anyway, on the subject of war, if we are shifting to war footing, then let's consider it. And in war, there are three areas of focus. Three. And as business people, we love talking about war. We love talking about strategy. Strategy, of course, is the overarching goal. It's your mission and your vision. And strategy, I would argue, is the thing that changes the least, even in times of crisis. Why? Look, if you're Disney World, then your job is, if you're the Disney Corporation, your job is still to be the provider of choice for entertainment for families. That's not changing. You're not going to become an airline, and you're not going to become a SaaS enterprise software company. You're going to stick with the strategy. This is the least resistant to sudden changes. And tactics are those methods, though, that we use as business people to achieve whatever the goals and strategies happen to be. And these are likely to change. These change a lot. Some are successful, some are not successful. And I know that you're constantly evaluating tactics and putting them up against the measurement of, are these tactics accomplishing what I want them to do? Now, the third piece, though, the third piece is something that we don't talk about as business people because, I mean, unless you're in supply chain, logistics has a different word, a different meaning rather in business. Logistics typically means, how am I going to get my widgets? Where are the injection molded parts going to come from? Where, what about my suppliers in Vietnam and in China, et cetera, et cetera? Those are the logistics things that typical business people talk about. But in the military, in the war analogy, logistics is the planning and the processes that you have to go through to get resources to where they need to be. And I'm going to give you a specific example at the end of this discussion. Without logistics, though, you have nothing. And this is the area that I think we should focus on. So Sun Tzu, in The Art of War, says, the line between disorder and order lies in logistics. Alexander the Great, my logisticians are a humorless lot, et cetera, et cetera. Alexander the Great, maybe not Alexander the Great boss. You think you have a hard boss to deal with. This guy was going to kill you if you failed your job. And a little bit more of a modern take on this, General Omar Bradley said very famously that amateurs study strategy and professionals study logistics. This is very significant, I think, in this time of crisis, because we all love, and we all know the guy who loves to talk about strategy. Go to market strategy, this strategy, that strategy, distribution strategy, pricing strategy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. However, the cards that we have to play are the ones that are in our hands right now. Marketing in crisis changes its shift from calendar to stopwatch. This is a question of logistics and tactics, not about strategy. So in long-term modes, yeah, strategy is going to tell you what tactics you use and what logistics you're going to have to develop to support those tactics. But in short-term reaction mode, where we are today, logistics will tell you what you can pull off, what tactics you can do. Strategy doesn't even show up at this stage, because all crises are short-term by definition. I mean, if this is the new normal, then that's not a crisis. That is the chilling effect of a pandemic that winds up affecting every aspect of life forever. And then that, which I don't think is going to happen, of course, nobody thinks that's going to happen. So weathering this crisis really causes us to focus on logistics. And logistics in this crisis really boil down to two things: conserve cash and protect revenue. To live to fight another day. You know, there's an old Chinese proverb that says that if you want to eat in a year, plant rice. In years, plant an orchard. And if you want to eat in 100 years, educate your children. And I realized that the entire proverb is designed to focus on long-term planning, et cetera, et cetera. But this is definitely planting rice. Nobody should be digging up a field and putting down apple trees. And, you know, sorry, Timmy, except for the homeschooling piece, we really need to focus to live to fight another day. I know that there are a lot of pundits out there who are saying, you know, guys, now's not the time to cut back on your advertising, or now's not the time to, you know, and yes, in certain cases, that may be very well true. But like Leo Tolstoy in Anna Karenina, I mean, that all happy marketers are happy for the same reason, and every unhappy marketer is unhappy for in his own way. The idea that you should not be thinking about conservation of cash or protecting your revenue is, in a word, it's insane. It's unsustainable. You have to live to fight another day. So when we say conserve cash, think about it as CPR. Cancel, postpone, and renegotiate. So obviously, all in-person events are canceled. And you should put every other thing that's in your marketing budget. And I know that you guys have built your marketing budgets with a great deal of care and focus and attention. Those are all on the table. If you haven't already gutted them and redeployed resources and rethought what's working and what's not working, then you should do it right away. Postpone your major project. This is not the time to do an overhaul of your website. This is, I mean, unless your website is just fundamentally broken, and we can talk about that in a second. But I mean, this is not the time to launch a branding strategy or to execute a new logo change or anything else that's not contributing to revenue. And then if you have long-term contracts with outside agencies, a PR firm, if you have research contracts with Gartner or Forrester or some of these other big firms, if you have consultants coming in, it's now time to take a look at those. And I think that you'll find that having the discussion is absolutely critical. And you may not get anywhere with it. You may wind up having to cancel altogether and eat the cancellation fees. But I think that everyone is in the same boat. And so I think that there'll be a lot more receptivity to renegotiation of essential services. This is going to free up resources, and this is going to free up those resources so that you can deploy them in the areas that are making the most positive impact. And if you don't have a culture of executing, testing, and modifying, again, some good can come of this. That's certainly a framework that should be part and parcel to every marketing organization. You're never going to get it right. I love the Toyota Motor Company's quality mantra, never perfect, only better. And in this sense, that's what we should be modeling. That remember that perfect will cause you to spend too much time contemplating and planning, and you won't execute, and you won't be able to move the needle. So that's conserving cash. Protecting revenue is all about the funnel. And again, I hope that you all are not in that scenario where you have no funnel, that you're of the 32% of businesses who do have a funnel. But funnel discussions should be top of mind for you guys. Funnel stage conversions. Also think about time in stage. What might have been a week, that it takes to go from a raw lead to a marketing qualified lead. That may expand. Also take a look at what your lead scoring metrics are. Are they too tight? Are they too loose? And again, if these terms are not familiar to you, if you'd like to discuss these things in greater detail, we have field guides for pretty much all of these, because you guys are busy. I understand. I mean, doing startup marketing, doing growth stage marketing, there are literally too many things to do, and you're being pulled in directions every day. And so having a couple of, oh yeah, this is a good template that I can use and borrow, we have those for you. You should be looking at your lead source and quality. You might have said that this particular, an account-based marketing strategy or a particular email campaign was performing really, really well. Check it again. And again, use your metrics to make sure that your prior assumptions and your prior behaviors are being consistent, because this is changing the way people, consumers, or businesses are interacting with prospective vendors. You should be all over web metrics, obviously, and Google Analytics, and if you have your favorite SEO package, if you're doing search engine optimization, if you're doing any of the business online, if you have an e-commerce presence, these are all things I presume that you have in place. But again, a daily dashboard of these things. And then for those folks that are doing calls to action on their websites, again, measuring and testing what is effective. We'll talk more about the testing methodology and the testing framework in a second. The other piece is that you really have to place an emphasis on situational intelligence. Everything has changed. If you don't have a good relationship, if you didn't have a good relationship with sales, and a lot of times marketing and sales guys are in conflict, or there's a dynamic tension, and it can be healthy. Sometimes it can devolve, and that's not good. If you don't have a good relationship, now is the time to fix that as soon as possible. Customer surveys. Find out where your customers are in their buying process, in their thought process, what's impacting them. There are some basic survey tools. If you're not comfortable crafting surveys, there are a lot of resources. We have resources that we can give you on how to design a general survey, best practices. Again, it's not rocket science, but if you're busy doing 50,000 other things, we can help you with that. For those of you who are selling complicated products, if you have an advisory council, a lot of times in my experience, we've gotten the best ideas, some of the best ideas for promotional or pricing adjustments or distribution changes from a core of trusted customers. And this is when I was working in B2B businesses. But they'll provide an insight and a perspective that from your internal marketing team's point of view would be difficult to find without going outside. If there's time, take a look at the changes that are impacting people's go-to-market and the buyer's journeys. Maybe they're the same, maybe your personas are the same, but it's not a bad idea if you have some spare cycles to take a look at even that fundamental. Are people's basic buying processes changing? So I've harped about funnel. And again, I can't believe that 68% don't have it, but if you do have a funnel, it probably looks something like this, unless you're doing something fancier like a demand unit waterfall. But I mean, funnels are not that difficult. It's amazing how straightforward funnels can be. And so there's no excuse not to have one. And you can change the names around. SiriusDecision has made a business out of consulting and educating people on how to develop funnels. But again, it's not that hard. You start off with so many raw leads. You filter them using some sort of fundamental or rudimentary lead scoring metric based on behavioral as well as demographic data. A lot of times what this step 2 is just checking to make sure that the email doesn't look like a fake email. donaldduck@gmail.com, for example, probably should get thrown out and not even put into the recycle bin. And then the leads get handed off. We talk about top of funnel and bottom of funnel. I'm going to talk about a lot of top of funnel things because that's typically a marketing discipline. But then when it transitions to sales, that's the bottom of the funnel. And again, you can help your sales brethren by communicating with them and offering structural changes, perhaps promotional pricing, perhaps a freemium product that you wouldn't have done in a pre-COVID world, but now you will consider in a post-COVID world. But the things to really think about here is that, first of all, that big red line is the boundary between marketing and sales, and it can't be an impermeable barrier. I cannot emphasize this enough. If you think you're communicating enough with sales, then maybe you can increase that communication. If you don't think you're communicating enough with sales, then now is the time to fix it. If you feel like you're over communicating with sales, that's probably you're doing the right amount. Really watch out for time in stage, conversion rates, and lead sources. So this is assuming that you already have a funnel in place. So you will know on average how long a lead will stay in a particular category before it's either promoted, pushed down deeper into the funnel, or kicked out into a recycling bin. And I just made one, but I mean, obviously there are multiple nurture tracks. The guy's not ready to buy, or they're still doing an evaluation, or there's no budget until Q4, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all different potential recycling programs or nurturing programs. But take a look at what your time in stage used to be and what your time in stage is now. And it's a hugely important piece. It's often overlooked relative to the obvious one, which is conversion rates. People will always love talking about conversion rates. So, okay, I got 1,000 raw leads. How many of them made it to marketing qualified? By the way, best case scenario based on Sirius is 9.3% on average. I have those statistics as well if you guys are interested on each of the stage conversion rates on average, what an average number is and what best case numbers are. So, and I'll be sharing some more statistics with you later on in this presentation. But the big thing to think about is how quickly things are moving through your funnel, which is time and stage and conversion rates. Also, from an attribution standpoint, if you spend 1/3 of your money on web and 1/3 of your money on email campaigns and 1/3 of your money on content creation, obviously this is not true, but can you attribute a lead? Can you take a deal that's closed won and can you tie it back to all of the marketing activities that customer participated with? Was it an email campaign? Did they schedule a demo? Did they do a webinar? What kind of things? And there are a lot of different ways to do marketing attribution, marketing ROI. They are all bad, in my opinion, but that's not to say that a bad marketing attribution system is it's infinitely better than having no marketing attribution. Whether you do first touch or last touch or a weighted model, there are many, many different ways to deal with it. There are some that are better than others, I think. I'm happy to talk to you guys offline if you're interested in that. There are also tons of resources on the web, obviously, for everything. Now, below the red line, again, I was talking with my colleague from sales. By the way, there are four of us in the performance team. I have a colleague who runs the sales discipline. He is the equivalent, he's much better, much smarter version of me running the sales discipline. And he and I had a conversation this morning about, hey, once we get people down into the funnel, it's his job or his peers' job to close them. And what they're talking about, what everybody is talking about post-COVID is how to affect pricing, how to change pricing strategy, how to do promotions, try before you buy, like I mentioned before, a freemium product, et cetera, et cetera. These are all things that are on the table. And it's no good if you get an inquiry all the way through and you can't put the ball across the line at the very, very end. And so those are two levers. They're spending a great deal of time talking about pricing and promotional strategies, which as marketers, you can help think about. And again, if you're providing real-time feedback, real voice of customer stuff, then that's going to be enormously useful in shaping those decisions. We're on stopwatches, not calendars though. So I told you that I was going to talk about top of funnel because that's really the piece that your CFO is going to come to you and say, your marketing budget was $1 million and you were going to support a $50 million projected revenue stream this year. We're going to have to cut the budget, or we're going to have to make some adjustments, and tell me what I can get, what the business can expect if we do the following. But here are some things to think about in terms of the top of funnel. Obviously, it's going to be expensive to get inquiries. And so what you want is more of those inquiries to come in and eventually become closed won opportunities. Here are some interesting statistics. So in terms of email campaigns, a lot of you guys are going to be relying on email campaigns. It's the one thing that you're guaranteed that a working from home scenario is not going to be impacted looking at it on a screen in your living room versus looking at it on a screen in your office. The email is going to be the same. There's a 3.1% click-through rate for emails in North America, but the average response is 0.03% for cold email campaigns. So what can you do to improve this? First of all, if you don't have an A/B testing methodology, if you don't have the ability to test subject lines, offers, copy, et cetera, get one. And again, happy to point you in the direction of some resources to help you there. But 46% improvement in performance if you use A/B testing. That just makes sense, guys, right? You know which subject line is going to resonate more, and you do more of that. This is not unlike Sony's famous product development strategy in the 80s and 90s, where they would do 10 different Walkman varieties, and they'd find the 2 that actually sold extremely well, and they would riff on those 2 designs, and the other 8 would get put into the grinder, so to speak. A/B testing is absolutely critical, and if you don't have it, again, get some right away. Happy to help. 320% more revenue when you get people to sign up and you provide them a welcome email. That sounds really dumb, but rather than just some sort of an offer, when they sign up, when they give you their email information to download a white paper or to attend a webinar, send them a welcome email. Really, really straightforward stuff. And then videos. I mean, people are looking at videos. Videos become more and more important, even in things like LinkedIn. But there's a 3x improvement in calls to action if you add a simple video. And look, you don't have to be David O. Selznick or Quentin Tarantino. A simple video talking about why it is that this message, this offer, this product, this service is going to be relevant to you, the potential customer. I've also included a little table there. These are some of my favorite and least favorite words in terms of subject lines. So please don't send me an email saying, I would like assistance as a speaker for Press Social and invite you to join and confirm. I'm surprised that Nigerian royalty is not in there. Maybe it's probably the next one in terms of least effective. But if these are the tools that you're going to be using, use them well. Now, on the subject of video, the last bullet was video. On the subject of video, again, if you don't have a strategy that relies on creation of video content, I would strongly suggest that you rethink that. Almost 60% of the executives in a B2B enterprise would rather watch a video than read texts. And we're not talking about cat videos, right? 12 times more shares. So if you're looking for virality, if you're looking for exposure, this is a great way to do it. 27% higher CTR, 24% higher conversion rates, again, for using videos. So, and those of you guys who have blogs, who are educating your customers about the value of the service that you provide, if you're doing more social selling, toss in a video. Again, 3 times more inbound links. Top of funnel, more top of funnel stuff. A lot of you guys are doing digital advertisements, and there's a shift that's going on, and many of you are aware of it. That banner ads, pop-ups, first of all, terrible. Ad blockers, though, are getting smarter and more prolific, and therefore display ads are getting less traction. So drive native ads. And those are the ads that appear in part of the content flow. They will escape the pernicious effects of ad blockers, and because they flow seamlessly into the content, they're less disruptive. And this less disruptive is a topic that Dasha and I have talked about a lot. It's this idea of permission-based marketing versus interruption-based marketing. You know, when somebody cold calls you on your phone, it's interruption-based. They don't have any idea what you're doing, and the typical experience for the consumer's perspective is annoyance. I was doing something else. I was cooking dinner. I was reading a white paper on XYZ, and you called me. Or in this scenario, you interrupted my viewing with a pop-up ad or a banner ad, versus permission-based marketing. And this is where the entire concept of social selling, using LinkedIn, for example, to make connections before you actually drive the sale, the hard sell. And again, like I said, Dasha's got an entire module on social selling and what companies and what individuals can do to leverage this new and highly, highly successful method of reaching customers. You see the last 2 statistics. Native ads get more views, and they're more effective in terms of converting to purchase. So, other top of funnel things to think about. Clearly, if your website isn't good right now, it's a bad time for you to have things like broken links or loading issues or other hygienic problems. So site health is really, really important. Kyle Allred, one of my associates, has developed a very lightweight tool that we use to evaluate websites. We can provide you feedback and some very practical tips and tricks, like, write in a more simple manner, for example. I mean, even the density of your web copy, by using grammar and word choice analytics tools, we can say, look, just because you're selling a complicated product doesn't mean you have to make it sound complicated. There's a lot of evidence that shows that emails and web copy work really, really well when you're writing between a 3rd and 5th grade level, which sounds ridiculous, even if you're selling a technical product. But again, complexity in your product offering doesn't mean complexity in your prose. It's probably advice that I should take. If you're doing search engine optimization, if you're doing keyword buys, these are things that you should be tracking on a daily basis anyway. And so these are, they should be obvious if they're where you're spending your money today. From a metrics standpoint, again, this is hard because growth stage companies, startup companies, I remember back in the day, it was always, we should get a more defined lead scoring framework, or my cost per lead, I think I've got a pretty good idea on these 3 areas, but it's difficult for me to track it down globally. Cost per click, my long-term value of customers, my customer acquisition costs. These metrics If you're interested, we have a field guide on the kind of metrics that are really important for growth stage and early stage companies. You don't have to have them all, right? You don't have a bevy of analysts and operations folks to provide these numbers. It's usually going to be you and your couple or two or three of your colleagues, or maybe Timmy the intern, who knows. But I mean, there are some things that you really can't go without. And so there's a field guide for that. If you're doing paid demand generation, and again, I cannot emphasize enough that social selling as part of a nurturing or part of a pre-sales process, absolutely critical. And Dasha, you're on the call, so I'm throwing you under the bus right now. If you guys want to reach out to her, she is, first of all, very, very nice. And second, very smart about social selling, and would be happy to share her content and her thoughts with you. So, look, other things to think about really boil down to conserving cash, protecting revenue, and living to fight another day. So when we think about all of these different things, I only touched on the top of the funnel stuff, but at Mercato, we like to think about marketing in the growth stage as a framework of activities and interrelationships. So for example, your business objectives are going to drive your marketing goal setting. I mean, if the objective is to expand into European operations, then clearly marketing is going to have to come up with a European rollout strategy. Your market goal settings will talk to this box called branding, markets, and segments. And again, I'm not going to go through each one of these boxes, but when we think about companies, we think about them in these ways from a marketing perspective, that things are very, very much interrelated. The center of this diagram, the demand generation, is what most people think about when they think about marketing. It's like, oh, your content and PR, and you know, you got a strategy and web, and these are the things that really do focus a lot of attention. But if you don't have good planning, then it doesn't matter what your execution is, right? Fast engine in a rocket that's pointed in the wrong direction will just get you to the wrong place sooner. And so planning and executing and measuring, these are very, very useful things in any marketing organization of any size, but especially if you're a small organization, if you have to conserve cash, if you're having to support multiple initiatives and launching a brand and getting visibility for a new product or a new category. These are all very challenging things, even if you had enough money. And it's all about prioritization. So happy to talk to you more about this slide if you guys are interested. But I want to leave you with a practical example. And those of you guys who've worked with me before know that I'm a big history buff. And so here's a real example of logistics influencing tactics. So the very handsome gentleman on the left, who's wearing a squirrel glued to his face, is Colonel Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, and he was the commander of the 20th Maine Regiment. Later on became president of Bowdoin College and governor of Maine. So as a spoiler alert, he survives. So this center picture is a picture of Little Round Top at the Battle of Gettysburg. It's taken a few years after, not a few years, a few months after. And you can see that it's rocky and hilly and forested. And all the way to the right, you have the map. And the blue represents the Union and the red represents the Confederacy. So this is during the Civil War, Battle of Gettysburg. Many historians argue that this is the most pivotal battle. It's deep in the heart of the North. General Robert E. Lee has taken his army well past Washington, D.C. And they were, ironically, talking about logistics, they were looking for shoes. They had heard that there was a warehouse in Gettysburg that had shoes, and a lot of Lee's soldiers didn't have good footwear. Well, General Meade found out that General Lee was back and rushed his troops up to Gettysburg to face this imminent threat and tried to decisively confront the Confederate army and defeat them, something that had eluded Union generals for the entirety of the war. So what you have here at the very, very bottom of that map on the right is a hill called Little Round Top. That's the picture in the middle. And it was discovered that because of some buffoonery on the part of a general named Sickles, that it was left undefended. And the risk there was that it was the very, very, very far end of the Union line. It was the farthest left end. And it was on a hill, and it would have had a very commanding position over the Union. And what happened in July at Gettysburg, what the men of the 20th Maine did, there are only 386 of them. And out of 104,000 Union soldiers, 386 men on the very, very leftmost end of the line. What they did was they changed the fate of history, the course of history. The strategy was the same. Like I said in the beginning, the strategy was the Union wanted to defeat the Confederacy. The Confederacy wanted to win a big enough victory to threaten Washington so that Lincoln would let them leave and separate into two separate countries. That strategy was the same. But what changed, and what this scenario talks about, is the tactics and how they were dictated by logistics. So this is a blow up in the afternoon of July 2nd. So you can see that the 20th Maine is that little bendy elbow, and they were facing off against the 15th Alabama. Because it was undefended, they rushed. Strong Vincent, General Strong Vincent. By the way, I love that name, right? Strong Vincent. Sounds like a comic book character. Strong Vincent rushes his folks. There are guys from New York and Pennsylvania and Maine to the top of Little Round Top, and they didn't have a chance to rearm or pick up additional supplies. So they basically had what they had on them. And what we see is that they are attacked. They are attacked uphill by the 15th Alabama Regiment, and twice. Now they're in really good position though. They're behind rocks and in trees, and they have the high ground, and the Alabama boys have to run up the hill, and it's a brutal, it's vicious, it's terrible. But during the course of this of these two assaults, Chamberlain realizes that his men are almost out of ammunition. They're facing a third assault supply, so they only had enough shot. They'd repelled 2 attacks. They were unable to repel a third attack. And again, from a logistics standpoint, logistics dictated what Chamberlain did next. Had no bullets, would not survive a third attack, so he orders his men to fix bayonets onto their muskets, and instead of defending, they attacked. They had fought bravely and suffered grievous losses, but this was the last thing that they expected. And logistical constraints that he had. It was enormously successful. The 15th Alabama finally broke and retreated, and the day was saved. The commander of the 15th Alabama was a guy named William Calvin Oates, who incidentally also became governor. I don't know what it is. Saved Little Round Top and the Army of the Potomac from defeat. So I leave this thought with you as an example of how logistics can impact tactics. If you're conserving cash, if you're protecting your revenue, your demand, those are the two principal resources, logistical resources, that you're looking to defend at all costs. And that based on these logistical constraints, you may have to change your tactics. And if you do, it may feel uncomfortable. It may feel ridiculous. It may feel unreasonable response in a normal situation. However, sometimes that's what it takes to survive, to live, to fight another day. So in closing, I'll leave you with another quote from the 6th President of the United States, John Quincy Adams. All of you guys are here because you're interested in your businesses. Maybe you're struggling. Maybe you're thinking, how do I make it through the next 90 days? People are going to look to you for guidance and inspiration. And if your actions inspire others to dream more, to learn more, to do more, and to become more, then you are a leader. And I think that that's we hear from our portfolio, we're doing it, is that we think that we're big believers in karma. That's Joe Kaiser's picture. He's the money guy. That's why he's smiling so big. And that's me. And those are our email addresses. And we're doing this because you never know what's going to happen. There could be the next Jeff Zuckerberg or Elon Musk in this piece, and we would love to be able to be part of your future. And so we are big. You guys, let us know. We're happy to help you with additional resources, et cetera. You don't have to be a portfolio company. With that, I'd like to give a final thank you to the UCI for letting us visit with them again. And the Beal Applied Innovation, Luis is a rock star, and Travis makes sure that everything works the way it should. And a big thank you to you guys for taking time out of your days to log in and listen to some thoughts about marketing in crisis. So with that, the formal presentation is over.
John, thank you so much. That was terrific. I think it was certainly even more than I anticipated. So I really appreciate that and your insights and your generosity in doing that.
Well, here's to having low expectations.
All right. So a few people have kind of come up and they're asking for the field guide for sales funnels. So I'm letting them know that they could reach out to you guys to get that. For those of you that are interested in the slide deck and the recording of the presentation, we will be putting that up on the UCI Beal Applied Innovation page. And so go to innovation.uci.edu later on this afternoon or tomorrow, and you should find it. And so, John, a couple of questions that have popped up. So the first one might be a little bit more of a sales question, but I'll throw it out to you. Does social distancing right now mean that it's more important to connect by voice or video call, or should salespeople maintain their regular cadence of kind of checking in with sales leads and existing customers?
That is a question that my colleague Justin Edwards would be extremely well suited to answer. Justin, by the way, looks nothing like Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, but I put that up there only because I like the mustache so much. But what we found, and this is my half effective answer because Justin's not on the call, is that most sales professionals know what's working. They will have a sales cadence. They'll have a first contact, email, telephone call, etc. And I think that the trigger to inform a change in behavior would be to see whether or not cadence changes are having any positive impact. So I would split up your contact list. If you have a pool of 20 prospects that you're working with, do 10 the regular way and 10 a different way, slightly different, more voice, for example, less email, for example. But everyone's going to be different, and depending on the industry that you're in, depending on the stage that the customer's in. But again, it's a bit of a fallback for me, but test and see what seems to be working. And especially now, if you're sending out emails, for example, this is the prime time to test different subject lines and different offers and different calls to action. So sorry, it's not much of an answer. My feeling is stay the course though, and while you're at it, and rather than throwing everything out and converting over.
Got it. Great. And listen, apologies in advance. Once you know it, here it's trash day, and here comes the trash collector right as I'm asking questions. But another one, do you have any good examples of native content in the age of COVID-19? So I guess that, kind of inherent in that question is, how do you strike the right tone of native content right now while everyone is either hunkered down or there's so many negative messages out in the world?
So native content, that's really interesting because it touches on something that I think that all of you guys have experienced firsthand. And that is the deluge of emails. Oh, I got an email from my dry cleaners talking about COVID-19. And actually, I shouldn't make fun of my dry cleaner. It talked about very specific things about hours of operation and what they're doing to minimize risk of spread of, because I don't even know what service or product that you're offering me. I may have just been sold as part of an email distribution list. So there's a great piece in the New York Times, I think, that talked about those sort of random COVID emails that people are getting. And I think that the key here is this something that I would be willing to say to a person if I met them, a prospective client, if I met them on the street? you still have your business to do. And so if you're offering a service, a product that will allow me to everything has to tie back to coronavirus. I think that completely ignoring it is of course not a good idea, but trying to take advantage and weaving the thread of coronavirus and the shutdown into every bit of content, original content that you're doing, also sounds fake. I mean, your business is your business. And that's what I want to hear about. If I wanted, I will listen to Dr. Fauci if I want to hear more about what to do and how to wash my hands, et cetera, et cetera. So stick to your business. If you have a legitimate opportunity, for example, one of our portfolio companies specializes in small business loans. Lendio, they're a great bunch of guys. If you guys are looking for funding, they are an interesting folks to talk to. Brock Blake is their CEO, fantastic guy. But they absolutely have a COVID-related message saying, you know, the CARE Act is going to create a tremendous amount of demand for SBA loans. We can help you. Reach out to us. That is, of course, legitimate. But the rest of the guys, I mean, if your content has a legitimate tie-in, then by all means be relevant. But don't. I mean, people can smell insincerity, and we've all seen it, and we've all rolled our eyes. I know we have. That being said, Farhad and I are going to wind up. He's on the call. We're going to wind up promoting a professional croquet league, I think, later on.
Okay. Hey, just kind of crystal ball type of thing. When this COVID crisis is behind us, do you think there will be residual long-term moves towards more video meetings and fewer face-to-face as it relates to enterprise and long lead time sales efforts?
You know, that's an interesting discussion. We've talked to our companies, and I've talked to colleagues that are in B2B, B to very large B organizations, their products. There is still an advantage. I mean, I go back to a similar analogy that I can go on the internet and get as many pictures of the Mona Lisa as I want. And yet, if you go to the Louvre and you go to the room, it's just packed. There are 50,000 people. And you're going to get a much worse experience than if you just popped it up on your iPad Pro in the beautiful detail, and you can zoom in, and you don't have to worry about wacky tourists, and the smell is not bad, and et cetera, et cetera. But humans really have this desire to connect. I think connect in real life. I mean, in the same way that one of the things I miss the most is going to the movies. Even though I have all of the streaming content, I watch the entire Netflix library, right? The ability to share a physical activity, a physical experience with other people. I think that is a piece of our essential humanity that's not going to make all of the digital tools that we're using, the video conferencing, et cetera, that is not going to cause that, I think, to go away, because it's still too much of a part of our intrinsic humanity. What I do think, though, is that all of us, you guys on the call, me, we're all going to get smarter about things like, all right, well, if the guy's got 2 extra hours to be on his computer or her computer and researching the benefits and reading testimonials or case studies to predetermine whether or not they're going to be inclined to listen to the rest of your story, that we're going to be a lot smarter about this entire concept of permission-based marketing. So Luis, if you're looking for a new water heater, and I figure out that you're looking for a new water heater, and I provide you 15 interesting things that you should be looking for a water heater, that kind of pre-selling, which is not even selling, it's permission-based marketing. You've indicated to me that you're interested because you downloaded this thing on what to look for in a good water heater, for example, that these kinds of things are much more sophisticated. You know, I think that in the 20th century, technology like mass distribution of mail, like paper mail, fax machines, anybody remember fax machines? And the telephone, widespread use of the telephone, really was a boon to marketers, but it was a club. It was a bludgeon, right? It was all interruption-based marketing. You'd get faxes, you'd get junk mail, you'd get those horrible blow-in cards from magazines. And yeah, maybe I wanted a copy of this, or maybe I wanted, to try out this promotional thing, or whatever the offer happened to be. But that was all very interruption based. And the new model is permission based, where I provide you something of value to you. I build the relationship before, so that I'm well positioned, because I do think that people buy from people they like.
Okay, very well said. And I think with that, I'm going to follow the advice of Edward Tufte, who is, one of the gurus of presentations, who said, "Only good things happen when you finish early." So we'll knock this thing off a couple of minutes early, and wrap it up. So as a reminder to everyone, we're hoping to put this content up on our website, innovation.uci.edu. We'll get that up later on today or first thing tomorrow morning, and keep an eye out on your emails for our next virtual event sometime next week. We're putting it together, haven't locked down all the details, so I can't release it just yet. But with that, I promise you, John, there's a lot of people that have given positive comments in the chat. Imagine that you're getting a very strong round of applause here. So thank you everyone for joining us, and stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you online next week.
Yes, thanks. Thanks everyone.
All right, bye-bye.